Welcome back, and this is your section 5, the Django fundamentals and your first REST endpoint. Before now, we've paid attention to Django, the basic Django structure, and how to actually do your backend with Django. So the difference between that and what we're about to do now is that with that you're having to build a full or bundled website, having the HTML, the static files such as the CSS and the rest of them all inside a single project. However, the downside is that with such platform, you won't be able to develop a full-fledged backend alone APIs. So because of this, that's why we felt the necessity to have you introduced to that so you know what actually you can do or is being done in that aspect of Django, and then get to focus on the real deal, which is the Django REST framework. So the DRF Django REST framework is what grants you the capability to not just return HTML as a response, but return actual JSON data. And with this, your mobile apps, your websites, your desktop apps, or whatsoever it is, can all make interactions to a single backend API. This makes it possible for an app and a website, all of the same platform, to be able to interact with a single backend and have everything properly synced and in unison. So at the end of this section, you should learn how to move from returning HTML from the server to JSON data. I'm going to transform our Django views to return data instead of HTML pages. So we're going to look at the RESTful principles, understanding the key principles behind REST architectural style. We're also going to create serializer to convert Django models to JSON and back. We're going to build and test our first API endpoint using DRF, which is your Django REST framework. So with what we're trying to achieve, from your front end, you could make requests to your database, and then your database, which is handled through your server, makes a response, which is your JSON data, and then this JSON data, it can be used on the web or on the mobile. From websites to mobile to web APIs. Previously, what we had was a traditional website, HTML pages, returning hello world, rendering HTML pages. But this time, we actually want to return JSON data, like you see. So the key transformation is from serving fully prepared HTML mules, we're going to be serving reusable data ingredients. First, what is REST on JSON, you could ask? REST is the short for representational state transfer. It's a set of rules for building web services. Now, it defines the client-server communication rules. It emphasizes statelessness and caching. It uses uniform interfaces. And then JSON is a short for JavaScript-oriented object notation. So it's a lightweight data that's used as an exchange format. It's easier for humans to read or write. It's easier for machines to parse or generate, and it's an alternative to XML. So this is how your typical HTML response will look with your HTML tags and all of that, the traditional format for web pages. And this is the way your JSON response will look. So your JSON is like your Python dictionary, but following strict rules such as using the double quotation mark and not having a comma at the last value. Let's also try to understand what the HTTP methods are. Now, before now, we've touched this a bit. We've looked at the get, we've looked at the post. These are HTTP methods. So the REST communicates via standard HTTP methods that represent a short form for CRUD, call it CRUD. This means create, read, update, and delete. Now, create means to create a new instance or an operation that does a post. Like we saw in our previous sessions, we saw how we were able to initiate the user interaction where the user could submit a form. Now, that is an example of a post method. Why is that? Because the user is submitting a data, and when he's submitting a data, he is creating a data. Then the read is to get. Like the English word literally implies, when you're reading, it means you're getting or retrieving a data from the server. Then to update is to put or patch. This means we're updating existing resources for the, or we're giving an entire change of a resource. Let's say we have a post of, let's say we have a post, right? And then already in our database stored, and we want to edit. This is what makes it possible that on platforms you're able to edit your profile, you're able to change your username, you're able to change your profile picture. So this update is what makes it possible, which is either the put or the patch. You use your put when you want to replace all the fields within the data model, and you use your patch where you want to update only specific fields of the data model. Then finally we have the delete. This is a destructive operation such that it removes a resource from the server. Now let's get right into Django REST framework and DRF. For a major part of your career, you're literally going to be doing DRF as a back-end developer. So first things first, we're going to install a DRF. We're going to maintain this same project directory. Let's close this. Going to maintain the same project directory. And remember that when making any installations or running your project, ensure you are in your virtual environment. So currently I am in my virtual environment. So I'm going to install. Then on the side, remember that each time you're having to work on any library or package, also remember to review or check out the documentation, because a major part of what I'm going to explain or whatever it is you're going to learn from most places were as a result of a major part of what's written here already. So this is the official documentation for the Django REST framework. Like you see here, to install, you install using pip install Django REST framework. Django REST framework. So we have that installing. Right, successfully installed. Now remember, some very important apps, after you include them in your project, there is need to have it added on your settings. So let's go ahead to add this. Add REST framework. Mind you, take note of the way it's spelled. Like you can see the documentation. So this documentation should be a guide to tell you actually how to set up a project and how to effectively use the package or framework. Let's proceed. So with this, we've been able to add a Django REST framework to our project. So DRF is like a super toolkit that sits on top of Django, specially designed for building APIs. So DRF is built layers on top of Django itself, such that it makes building APIs a lot less hectic. So the key features of DRF is serialization of Django models to JSON, deserialization. So deserialization is the opposite of serialization. So serialization is more like getting the structure of the database model, remember what a model is, and then converting it to JSON. While deserialization is converting the JSON that it receives from the input to the Django models. Now, it also creates or grants us access to a browsable API or browsable API interface such that we can actually interact with our API from this interface. So it also provides authentication and permission classes, then throttling and pagination. I mean, DRF is a whole lot big. So DRF is like a Swiss army for APIs. It has everything you need to build a professional web service on top of Django. Let's get in. Right. So we're going to look at what a serializer is. So for the purpose of this DRF, I would like we create another app, Python. You can also decide to have an entire new project for this. I'll prefer to maintain this Python manage.py. Remember, pause this and try to remember how to create an app. Hope you got that right. Start app. So we're going to call this, let's say, post. So would literally migrate a couple of things from inside the other. I just want to have it isolated. Now inside the post app, remember after you include an app, you should add it here. So post.apps.post config. Right. So this includes it to our app. Remember there's something else. You add it to your URLs. So your path API post, okay, that does it. Then we have to include our URLs. Remember, I have a file, URLs. Also, we create a new file, serializers.py. Remember that before now, when we had to work with forms to collect data, we saw the forms as a bouncer. Now this also is like a club bouncer, but this time it's for JSON data. So like your forms, literally similar to your forms, we have also what we call the serializers. So let's call this post serializer. So it also will also inherit from Django's serializers, or rather REST framework serializers dot model serializer. So we import this from REST framework. We import it from REST framework. Django. So we have this. So we have this. Next thing is to have our class meta where we define our model, the model we wish to use, and the fields we wish to use. So take note, even in your forms, you can have your all as represented this way, but let's have individual ID, title, and all of that. So I would prefer to have a dedicated post model instead of using the previous one. So let's have class post. Let's have this. Right, so we're going to make migrations. Remember that. Going to make migrations. Okay, so we're having a warning. We need to include URL here. So for now, just comment this out so we don't get any warning. Here, have this, then we migrate our changes to the database schema. Right, so let's run our code, run server. Right, so on our post serializers we have it set, so we can import this post from the post apps models. Post the model import post. Right, so with this we also proceed to create our first view, API view. So this serializer is actually what you need to serialize and deserialize data, like I had explained. So take a little break and answer the question in the quiz. See you right back.